So there's this recent news article that talks about how white South Africans are wanting to come back to South Africa, or at least some of them are.
Headline: South African refugees are left to fend for themselves. Subline: failures in the government-funded refugee system are marring Trump's decision to welcome South Africans. A free press investigation has...
Guys, over a year ago, Ramaphosa made this bet about the 49 Afrikaners who left South Africa to head to the US. Look.
When you run away, you're a coward.
I personally don't believe South Africa should take back any of the white Afrikaners that left South Africa due to the genocide of the white farmers that just simply didn't exist.
Welcome to my channel. My name is Nishika and this is the People's Tea channel. We are talking about the white South Africa. Americans right now, they're wondering why is it that the white South Africans who were given asylum status in America, why did they decide to move back to South Africa? That's the question which is going on all over the world, not only in America. So today's video, we are discussing much more, so stay tuned. At the end, we'll discuss much more. Please, guys, subscribe to my channel, and yes, stay tuned.
Guys, over a year ago, Ramaphosa made this bet about the 49 Afrikaners who left South Africa to head to the US. Look.
When you run away, you're a coward. And that's a real cowardly act. And I expect every South African to stay here and we work together and we solve our problems. We've got the most beautiful country in the world. And I can bet you they will be back soon because there's no country like South Africa. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, it looks like Ramaphosa's bet might come true. You can see that thousands of white South Africans are planning to return home, despite Trump's statements that white minority is being persecuted by the country's black majority government. The article's headline says some are returning to a better life, and you can see that they cite better quality of life and lower cost of living in South Africa. And even the agencies, they report surge in inquiries from expats wanting to return. New portal allows South Africans to restore citizenship. What do you guys think about this? Because Ramaphosa made that bet and he said that they'll come home soon. And only in a year time, they all want to return. Let me know what you guys think about this. Comment below.
So there's this recent news article that talks about how white South Africans are wanting to come back to South Africa, or at least some of them are. And I'm interested in this article, not necessarily for the reasons that many people have been interested in it, because it kind of highlights this oxymoron of how there's this narrative of white people are in danger and now there's also white people who want to come back. And so who's telling the truth? Obviously, I think the discourses about whiteness being, or white people being in danger in South Africa is nonsensical. But I think it does highlight a broader phenomenon that we as South Africans should be critical of and pay attention to. And that is just that white people have been leaving for decades before now. That there has been this kind of white flight or white exodus. And I use these terms intentionally because these are the kinds of terms that people in my PhD research spoke about when they spoke of white people leaving South Africa. I conducted my PhD while some of these discourses about white people being victims were starting to come to the fore. And I was doing fieldwork and interviews and a survey. And part of my research kind of teased out from research participants that this is something that's kind of part of everyday life for white South Africans. Though there is now this obvious refugee program that we should be critical of, that the United States is more directly meddling in our domestic affairs and in our place within the geopolitical order, there is this general trend that has been happening in South Africa of white people leaving after apartheid. And it's taken on various kind of ideological flavors. Maybe it's flight because people are taking flight because they're in danger, or maybe there's a further theological component to it, this idea of an exodus. And I think speaking about an exodus is interesting because generally speaking, whiteness and Christianity have a very, very intimate relationship, because race and Christianity have a very intimate relationship. Christianity's history, especially in South Africa, was critical, and Christianity's work in South Africa was critical to the development of racial categorization. It's from the initial difference marking of I am a Christian and you are a heathen, that eventually race and racial categorization take more staunch shape, more staunch form, kind of get formalized in South Africa. And so when we hear people using theological terms to describe their experience of racial identity, we start to see how those entanglements endure in some ways. Not always universally. Sometimes exodus can have a completely non-theological meaning, but there is something interesting to tease out in that enduring relationship. I think we need to be critical in South Africa, obviously, of the Afrikaner refugee program, but we need broader critical conversations about why there is still this general trend, this general desire amongst white South Africans, even those who are not going to be part of the Afrikaner refugee program, this impetus to want to leave South Africa because they, for some reason, feel threatened, they feel like they're in danger, they feel unsafe, they feel disorientated. I think effectively describing what is driving those actions helps us to understand whiteness as a phenomenon better. Not so that we can coddle whiteness, again, not so that we can feel sorry for white people, not so that we can go and take care of all the white people, the rich people who can now move overseas. That's not my interest. My interest is to understand what is the machination of white identity that results in people trying to flee when they lose privilege, when they lose hegemonic power. And I think paying attention not just to refugees, but to, generally speaking, how white South Africans feel uncomfortable in post-apartheid South Africa will give us important insight into that.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the My Opinion Show with Grandma Sherry. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Did y'all hear the latest about those white South Africans? They leaving. You heard me. They packing their bag and going back. They said they had it better over there. They said America is too expensive, and they seeing all this shit that Trump is doing. They said it's too much crime for them. Hell, they going back. They said they had plenty of black friends over there. They didn't realize how racist America is up here. They didn't realize that these white folks were this racist towards black and brown people. They said, fuck this shit. Packing their bags, y'all. They going back home. They said they had it better over there in South Africa. You know how Trump was saying it's a genocide out there against the white people? The white folks he brought here. You know, those refugees. They're going back to South Africa. Y'all heard me. They're going back over there because they said they had it better over there. We're going to repeat that. They had it better over there. But Trump said there was a genocide. Remember that shit? They going back home to South Africa. They said it's too expensive, too much crime out here, too much shit is going on with Trump. They're going back to South Africa to be with their black friends.
South African refugees are left to fend for themselves. Subline. Failures in the government-funded refugee system are marring Trump's decision to welcome South Africans, a free press investigation has found. Opening words of the article. Languishing in cockroach-infested apartments, walking miles to the grocery store for food, and eating just one meal a day to save money. This is the life in America for some newly arrived Afrikaner refugees from South Africa. Quote from a former farmer who arrived in Denver with his wife and mother in September. There were people slumped over everywhere from using fentanyl and prostitution happening on the street corners. So, I guess we were right. And to just add on to that, again, Reuters has run this quite extraordinary piece. The headline saying, Trump says white South Africans are persecuted. Some are returning to South Africa for a better life. I'm just going to read it to you because it's extraordinary. Andrew WHYT left South Africa after being held up at gunpoint in his car, but now he feels there are greater threats in the United States, he said, citing mass shootings in public places as well as violence by U.S. immigration officials. Quote, people are being shot in broad daylight. American citizens are being shot and killed. I don't want to live in a place like this, said the 53-year-old who moved to California. WHYT plans to return to South Africa this year, one of thousands of white South Africans coming back, despite Trump's statements that the white minority is being persecuted by the country's black majority government. There is nothing more damning of Trump's America's lies, deceit, and fake news than white South Africans coming back to the country that Trump's America says white South Africans are being oppressed and persecuted in, from the country, America, which Trump's America says is the golden safeguard refuge, heaven on earth for white South Africans fleeing alleged black oppression of white people. It goes on. WHYT is among 12,000 people who have checked their citizenship status in an online portal launched by the government in November after the overturning of a 1995 law in South Africa that stripped citizenship from some South Africans who left. They represent a fraction of South Africans abroad. The latest official statistics on returnees from 2022 show that almost 15,000 white South Africans returned that year. 15,000 sure is a lot of people returning to a country to face oppression by the majority.
That were pretty much the only people Donald Trump has let into the country since his administration took over are returning home. They came to the United States because they said they were being persecuted in their home country, and now they're going back because they say nobody is meant to live the way you have to live in the United States. It's too expensive and it's too violent.
So I other white South Africans are crawling back home. Look, I'm not a hater.
The Trump administration has closed refugee processing for refugees from all around the world, except for white South Africans, Afrikaners, who he says were experiencing a white genocide in South Africa. So he opened the doors to these refugees from South Africa, and now over 1,000 of them are repatriating to South Africa because they hate it here so much in Trump's America. They don't even want to stay. It turns out they actually don't need protection. I mean, we kind of told them that. And also, what an embarrassment. What a joke.
The only people Trump let in as refugees are now fleeing America because of him. Do you remember when Trump granted refugee status to white South Africans called Afrikaners because he claimed that they were facing racial genocide by black South Africans? Well, now those same people are deciding to flee the United States to go back to South Africa because they think Trump's America is too expensive and too violent. Like Andrew WHYT, who originally left South Africa after being held up at gunpoint in his car, but now he feels that America is far more violent. Quote, people are being shot in broad daylight. American citizens are being shot and killed. I don't want to live in a place like this. Or Benjamin Schoenwinkel, a 59-year-old Afrikaner who flew to America after Trump's announcement. But when he landed here seeking asylum, he was arrested and sent to a detention facility in Georgia. In total, more than 12,000 South African expatriates have checked their eligibility to return home since November, a 70% increase in 6 months, and more than 1,000 people have already reclaimed their citizenship, citing political turmoil and increased cost of living in the U.S. So after Trump and Stephen Miller spent months trying to build this political narrative about saving Afrikaners from white genocide, those same people are fleeing America to get away from the problems created by Trump.
I personally don't believe South Africa should take back any of the white Afrikaners that left South Africa due to the genocide of the white farmers that just simply didn't exist.
A growing number of South Africans returning home from abroad. This comes as some citizens consider leaving under a refugee program that was introduced by the United States administration of Donald Trump following unfounded claims of a so-called white genocide in the country.
What the fuck?
We talked briefly about white South Africans who arrived to America as refugees. They had horrible living conditions, complaining about only getting $2,000 a month, and that wasn't enough to live, and that America is really violent. More than 12,000 South Africans have checked their citizenship status on a portal that was launched. That represents a fraction of the total South Africans abroad. But official statistics have showed that over 15,000 South Africans have repatriated to South Africa in the last 2 years. Over 1,000 have reclaimed their citizenship, and the rest in America are complaining about the cost of living, saying that the money they're receiving from the government is not adequate, that it's too expensive, they can't keep it with their bills, and they're not receiving preferential treatment that they thought they would receive under Donald Trump.
Refugees is that they're spending weeks in motels in unsafe areas. They're being offered housing that is full of mold, apartments that are full of mold in expensive areas. So each refugee is allotted $2,000, and all of that has been going to rent. So they're really left with nothing. And these agencies are supposed to help them apply to jobs, obtain temporary benefits such as SNAP and Medicaid. They don't have transportation. They don't have the right clothing.
So this
This is why they say racism is expensive. You left your country where your great-great-great-grandparents settled, and due to your fear of being a minority in a country that you shouldn't be in, you came to America thinking you were going to get preferential treatment, that America was a white country. You found out America's not a white country. You also found out that you came here and they treated you like a refugee, and they made you a poor white person, meaning you were forgotten about and you got no benefits besides the free $2,000 that you get that I don't receive. And now you're going back to South Africa because you realize that your life there is better than your life here. I don't think you guys should be taking these people back, South Africa. That's just my opinion. Hey, I'm not South African. What do I know? All I know is that racism is expensive, and when you come to a country as a racist and you go back to a country as a racist, you're still a racist. Ciao.
Do you guys remember in May of last year when Donald Trump announced that he was going to be bringing in white South Africans as refugees? Because he loudly claimed in front of South Africa's president and his white cabinet members that white people in South Africa were being genocided. In case you don't remember, here is a short clip of somebody in Trump's administration welcoming the South Africans, the white South Africans, and saying that they have good seeds which will grow in the United States.
Over the years, and I am sure that you will be successful. As you know, a lot of you, I think, are farmers, right? When you have quality seeds, you can put them in foreign soil and they will blossom, they will bloom. And we are excited to welcome you here to our country where we think you will bloom, and we will hopefully allow you to have fulfilling lives for your children, and then we will bloom and we will benefit alongside you. So thank you very much for coming.
Really unnerving to hear MAGA men talk about the seeds of growth or whatever he was babbling about. But yeah, anyway, white South Africans were like the only group that Donald Trump wanted to allow to legally come to the United States. And apparently, they're all leaving. Thousands of white South Africans repatriate as U.S. safety fears grow. Thousands of white South Africans are returning home after years abroad, reversing a long-standing trend of immigration. Many are reclaiming citizenship through a government portal launched after the repeal of a 1995 law that had stripped citizenship from some expatriates. Part of the migration story is shaped by the United States. The Trump administration launched a program offering refuge to white South Africans, particularly Afrikaners, citing concerns over crime and alleged persecution, claims that South African authorities deny. While some took advantage of the U.S. program, growing worries about mass shootings, immigration enforcement, and political instability in the U.S. have prompted many to reconsider and return home. Improvements in infrastructure like the near end of daily power outages and enhanced private security have boosted confidence among those moving back. Analysts say the trend reflects both practical and economic considerations. Remote work has made it easier for professionals to live in South Africa while keeping jobs abroad. Many see South Africa as offering a safer, more affordable, and more stable environment than some countries they have lived in, including the United States. So obviously Donald Trump is not to blame for mass shootings or the healthcare issues of the United States. He's not solely to blame. But the U.S. has some serious systemic issues, and anybody coming here as a refugee from a relatively safe country like South Africa will quickly realize, like, oh, I've made a terrible mistake. Reuters did a whole article on this too, and here's a clip from Reuters talking about people that have lived in the U.S. for decades and who decided, yeah, screw this, I'm moving back to South Africa.
Naomi Sapphire was born in South Africa and lived for 2 decades in the United States. She came back home for a holiday and realized how much she missed this place.
You cannot dictate what makes your heart happy. So you leave, and then you come back because ultimately this is home.
Last year, Sapphire left North Carolina for a seaside town in South Africa's Western Cape. Now, she says her 3 children spend more time outdoors, health insurance is affordable, and she prefers the schools. She's among thousands of white South Africans coming back from abroad, despite U.S. President Donald Trump's statements that South Africa's white minority is being persecuted by the country's black majority government.
Terrible things are happening in South Africa.
The Trump administration is ramping up its new refugee program for white South Africans, focusing on Afrikaners, the descendants of Dutch settlers, such as Sapphire and her family. About 3,500 South Africans have entered the United States as refugees since the program started in May 2025. Pretoria says there is no evidence of discrimination or persecution against whites. Many white South Africans and Afrikaners
healthcare and better schools, and they're relatively safer than the United States. But none of those people want to be here for obvious reasons. It's just another hilarious saga in Trump's failures. Like, he genuinely thought that South Africans were going to be like clamoring over each other to get to the United States. Hilarious and stupid.
So I hear the white South Africans are crawling back home. Look, I'm not a hater. I'm really not a hater. I just found it really hilarious when I saw a couple news articles about the fact that there's been a growing number of white South Africans who came here to America like in the last 3 years or whatever, under refugee status, mind you, because Donald Trump and Elon Musk have been pushing the white genocide conspiracy theory. There's a supposed white genocide happening in South Africa. I still have yet to see this. I don't know. I haven't seen it. But anyway, Mr. Apartheid himself, Elon Musk, said it's true, so it must be true. And so naturally, his pet piggy said, yeah, that's gotta be true. So Trump somehow, after making the entirety of his multiple campaigns about cracking down on immigration and kicking people who've lived here their whole lives out, somehow justified allowing only white South Africans refuge in the United States because they're just really scared of persecution over there where they have like 70% of the fucking resources when they're only 9% of the population. So a lot of them came over here in the thousands at least, like I'm gonna guess good 10K came over here and they thought that the racism is not working in their favor the way they thought it would be. They're realizing, oh shit, you know, there is systemic racism and unequal distribution of resources in this country too, but the difference is that my racial group is more than 9% of the population. So just in terms of odds, it's less likely that I'm gonna have this charmed a fucking life as I do in South Africa, where most people live under the poverty line. So now there's apparently all these Facebook groups that are centered around like repatriating South Africa for these white South Africans. And all I want to say to the South African government is, do not let them back in. No, because you want to be most broke in fucking Arkansas. So why do you want to go back home now? I thought you were being persecuted, babes. Now you're homesick. Majority of them being white are returning to South Africa because they fear for their lives. Mr. Andrew Veitch says he left SA because he was held at gunpoint in Prague and he felt unsafe. Now he says he fears for his life because there's greater threats in the United States, citing mass shootings in public places as well as violent failures immigration officers. He is one of 12,000 people that have checked their citizen status online since November last year. 12,000 people have shown interest. Minister of Home Affairs, Leon Schreiber, says 1,000 have reclaimed their citizenship, a number expected to grow significantly as this new program that has revoked the 1995 law that says if you go and live abroad, your citizenship is revoked. That has been changed so people can apply for citizenship. Therefore, a fact now that the DA is encompasses as a strategy to get more white people to return to South Africa to increase their voting.
Well, here's the thing. The funny part is people are surprised that fast forward a couple of months, white South African, they're literally saying we are packing our bags and we're moving back to South Africa. Remember, initially they said they felt unsafe in South Africa because they felt the government of South Africa is targeting them. So fast forward a couple of months, what has changed? Why is it that they decided to go back to South Africa? Were they lying when they say they felt South Africa isn't safe? That's the question people are asking. So let's go back a bit. Remember, during the apartheid time, there used to be segregation in South Africa where there used to be a part for white and then a part for black. And after apartheid, remember, the late President Nelson Mandela decided to form a rainbow nation where the black South Africa and the white South Africa, they can live united peacefully and coexist and yes, and form a united South Africa. And that's basically what is happening right now. The white South Africans are known as part and parcel of South Africa, and they enjoy the same equal rights as the black South African. But one thing you need to understand is during the apartheid time, the white South Africa were given education, they were given land, they were given good jobs, they were given the lifestyle of white South Africa was much better as compared to the black South Africa. So these people, even currently as we speak, their kind of lifestyle is much better as compared to the black South Africa. So when you hear situations where these white settlers who moved to America and telling you life in America is expensive and it's dangerous, what they're meaning is literally they're missing their life in South Africa, where they can live in a house where there's a big mansion, big pieces of land, and they can hire 2 nannies, they can have farm workers left, right, and center at affordable prices. That's basically what they're missing. Because in America, you're being told for you to afford the American dream, you need to work 2-3 times jobs in order to have that lifestyle. Yes, and when I say lifestyle, I don't mean the rich lifestyle. I mean just the basic necessity lifestyle as an American, because the cost of having an American dream, it's only the millionaires and billionaires who can afford it. But the middle class and the lower class, they're just living an average life. So yes, the white South African came to America. They saw and they realized, no, this is not the life I want. I want to go back home because I miss it. And that's where we are today. So the reason why people are criticizing this whole situation is because the current administration came into power and they did say one thing. They are going down to remove the asylum-seeking status for nearly everybody in the world unless it's critical, those unique cases. And yes, they made an allowance for this South African case where they were given this opportunity. But it's only for white South Africa, not black South Africa, only the white South Africa. They've been given asylum seeking in America. But if you're a black South African, you seek that asylum seeking, chances are you'll not get it. So here we are. You've been given asylum seeking. You've moved to America. You and your family. Yes, you have been given a certain amount of money, and somehow, fast forward a couple of months later, you are complaining and saying, well, I realize life in America is expensive and it's too dangerous. Now I want to go back home. So what exactly were they promised that they were going to be given in America that were not met? Is it that they were promised milk and honey? Were they told American dream will fall on their laps? What exactly were they promised? That's the question people are asking, and they'd love to have the answer. Anyway, guys, so that's basically what is happening. I'd love to hear your thoughts, exactly what's going on with this white South Africa. Did they meet the expectations, or did they overvalue themselves and realize the reality is something different? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear from you guys. And kindly subscribe to my channel.